Do it this way. All the mechanics this morning, Julie. Welcome.
Hello, good
I'm
morning.
so excited because whenever I get to talk to a client and a new client, it's really fun because I feel like we get one, we get a meeting in, but two, we get extra time together. So with me this morning is Julie Ruskin Ohana, and I put the Ruskin in because maybe Rachel's watching or she'll watch later. But she was my first Ruskin love. And I'm so glad she introduced us because I love the Ruskin family.
Oh,
So welcome. Julie is the founder, owner of Culinary Art Therapy. And I find this so intriguing because I think so many of us cook. We might talk with our friends, we might talk with our moms, we might have our kids next to us when we're doing it. And so, to some degree, we've all been cooking and doing therapy of sorts, but yet you've made it as a therapist to really take it and say, this is therapy. This is how we do connect. So
absolutely.
welcome.
I
And
think the whole idea of it is making it intentional, just like other creative techniques that people were doing with music or dance, and they realized that there's therapeutic property. This is no different. It's just I'm calling it out to say what it is or what it can be for so many people, and to just try and make people aware and try and show the world that anybody can do this if you want to.
so I like to call people out. That's just my nature a little bit. So we're going to talk about a lot of things. But when people hear music and art therapy, and now culinary art therapy, what do you say to the naysayers? What do you say to this? Like, what is this all about?
So that's a great question, and I like to think that I don't think that there actually are that many naysayers these days,
Mhm.
because I think in 2021 the world, most people are ready for this kind of technique and this kind of approach. And I think many years ago, when music and art therapy were just starting out, people were more skeptical because Instagram didn't exist and social
Mhm.
media didn't exist, and the world kind of wasn't in this position to be as accepting to these kinds of practices. And even though this is an idea and a practice that's been with me and in my head for several decades, I really felt like this was the time to kind of launch this idea, because the world is so ready and accepting, and people, no pun intended, but people eat up this idea.
Mhm.
We're doing it already. Why not be mindful of what we're doing and make it work for our lives?
Well, there's a couple I feel like there's so many things, and we've talked about many as we started working together, but I have to talk about this year in particular. We go into a pandemic and the Instagram blows up with everybody deciding they're going to make bread. Now, then the other part of the Instagram blows up going, I'm gaining weight. I'm like, yeah, people, you're making bread. So, I mean, what was it about this bread craze and everybody who never probably walked near their kitchen? I don't mean the people who were already in their kitchen.
Right.
I mean, I go on even today and see these guys who are making bread at home.
Right. Don't forget about the banana bread craze. That was a
Oh
big one
yeah,
too. Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Sourdough and banana bread.
The
Everybody was
sourdough.
thinking
I
about it.
mean, okay. I like banana bread, but the sourdough was like, I mean, I forget calling it COVID-19. We could have just called it, bread 19. I mean, it was just
Right.
craziness.
Right. Well, I think it didn't surprise me. And it really, to me, has been one of those COVID silver linings, seeing the rest of the world, have this aha moment in their kitchen, because during the pandemic, we're all looking for comfort. We're all,
Mm,
first of all, we were looking for a way, in the early days when we were all really huddled at home and kind of in lockdown, people were looking for a form of entertaining themselves.
yeah.
And if you were blessed enough to have a roof over your head and a kitchen in your home, you had that built-in entertainment. You had the facilities and the means to come up with those activities.
Hmm.
Aside from that, people were looking to comfort themselves, and there's a million reasons why we call it comfort food.
Right.
But the thing is that people focus on the comfort being food. I focus on the comfort being the creating of the food. And
Mm.
to avoid the pandemic 15, part of it is you have to share the comfort. You have to.
Oh, really? That's
you
part of it?
That's part of it. You got to share in the joys of your creations, and that is part of the process being therapeutic. That I tell people all the time, it's not about eating for comfort. It's about the creating and
Hmm.
being mindful in the moment, and really being in the process, and then hopefully sharing in that process with others, which, yes, right now is hard to do, but we've done this. All my sessions, which have been
Hmm.
over Zoom, have really blown me away at how much we're still able to connect. And you make drop-offs to people's porches, and you send things to loved ones, and there are ways to make it work.
It's interesting because history through therapy has shown if you sit down and eat a meal with your kids,
Right.
you will have that connection. And
Yes.
so it's not a far toss to see that if you engage with your kids in that setting of the table, then move to cutting, you know, of the salad and the different things, or um, and I will say, of a mom of a daughter and two boys, I was always, as they got older, fearful that my boys would go off and not know how to cook for themselves. At some point, at some point they're young and you let them set the table and you do things in the kitchen, but it was also sending them off, and they were going to have an apartment and grocery shop, and not to be sexist, but I was like, you better learn to cook.
Right. It's a life
I'm
skill.
not, yeah, I mean, there were life skills that they needed,
Right.
so there was, but it's also interesting in that life skill of learning that they're going to also do it their way and not my way per
Right.
se. And
Right.
so those conversations come up now as they're young adults, and they come home and you're standing there and you're going, oh, I wouldn't, but you also have to sort of engage in those conversations. But I'm interested, as the more I work, um, the less I like to cook, but when I do, I love it, and I love to
Right.
entertain. And so I go in those paths of, my husband and I love to do things together in the kitchen when we love to do it.
Right.
But like when my daughter comes home, I love it because she loves to cook for us. And so it's a whole different like conversation that happens in the kitchen. And I I think about what you're doing, and the conversations that happen in a kitchen around a table are like no other conversation.
Absolutely. It's true. It brings people together. And that's why I often tell people, going back to the whole concept of the family meal, which I'm a firm believer in, it's not about the food and making these 12 course elaborate, super fancy, time consuming
Mm-hmm.
meals. It's about the act of doing it together. It's about chopping vegetables for a
Mm-hmm.
salad. Washing and peeling. It's the process that brings people together and evokes the conversation, and just kind of puts you at ease a little bit, so you're in a place to open up and be your authentic self, and maybe be a little bit vulnerable and
Mm-hmm.
share. And that's where the magic happens.
So we can't show, you were on Fox 2 yesterday with far better professionals asking you questions than I, but um, we can't show a session with in therapy. You do other kinds of workshops and things like that. But can you describe what sort of what takes place and how a session might take place. And every session would be different, we know.
Right.
But
Right.
as people are watching and wanting to sort of, engage and again, Julie can be found at culinaryarttherapy.com. She's the most exquisite. I mean, imagine it's food. So when you go to Instagram, you get hungry. But and I love your Instagram and social media. But describe what a sort of a session might be.
Sure. So, right, like you said, every session's a little bit different. And I think the beauty of this work is it can be as clinical as a client needs. It really can be, rooted in deep discussions, helping people with their mental health. Um, Definitely, working with clients with anxiety and depression, or it can be as loosely defined as therapeutic as the person wants, where they're just looking for something to make them feel good, to bring a family together, bring a group of friends together, and do something beneficial for themselves, enjoyable, and fun. So every session always starts with really getting to know the client and their needs, giving them a questionnaire that I always use in terms of just finding out what are their food likes, what are their food dislikes, what are their allergies if they have any. Obviously, I'm not going to make a suggested menu that somebody's going to come back to me and say, oh my God, that sounds horrible. I want them to enjoy it. Right. So it's really meeting the client where they're at. And once we do that, once we establish all of those things, then I create a suggested menu. I send all of the recipes to them. Sometimes I provide the groceries, sometimes they get their own groceries, and then we cook. And before we get to the cooking, actually, there's always that discussion piece of introduction of what are we doing? What are we here for? What's going to happen? What are your expectations? Just kind of setting the stage. Then we cook. Then there's always an eating part, because what's the point of cooking if you can't really enjoy the fruits of your labor? And then we close with more discussion. It's not just about, okay, we cooked, we made it, the dish is this final dish, it's done, but it's really unpacking what was the process like? What did you get out of it? Was there any surprises? Did something come to you that you didn't expect? And really kind of following through with those pieces to just bring it all together.
What and I think about it, are there ages, a certain age group that works or doesn't work with this?
That's one of the best parts. I worked with clients who are as young as 2-3 years old, and I've worked with clients into their 90s. Okay. The little ones, obviously they're with their parents or with an adult to be able to help them along. Sure. And the older adults, they're one of my favorite parts about this is bringing the topic of memory, food and memory. The sense of smell is the strongest of the senses tied to memory. And when you talk, especially to a group of older adults who have a whole, hopefully beautiful lifetime of memories made, when you talk about food, the stories that come from it, the experiences is really powerful. And that's what's so amazing about this, is that it really does connect with, and resonate with people of all ages.
I want to talk about that, because part of your background and your love for this was cooking with your own bubby. So let's talk a little bit about how you got your own love and a little bit about who you are and your background.
So do you remember those like plastic Fisher Price blue and red little kitchen table sets with these little plastic chairs? So my sister and I grew up, and I have such vivid memories of my mom making something. I don't even know what she was cooking. And my sister and I had our little plastic chairs placed right in front of the oven with the oven light on. And the two of us are sitting next to each other watching whatever's in the oven. And that's the point, is I don't remember what was in the oven. I remember the experience.
Being there. Yeah.
Right. My mom was cooking something with us. She's standing over the kitchen doing what she's doing. My sister and I are together waiting for this, gift to come out of the oven for us. And I remember and I feel the love. And that's where it started. My grandma did that with us. We were both very close with my grandmother, who was Hungarian and made all sorts of amazing Hungarian pastries and dishes. And it's really, it's the conversations and the family time that happened around the table, standing over the counter, chopping and peeling and slicing and
Yeah.
all of those things. And when I was in graduate school, I had to write a thesis, and I just knew that I found cooking to be therapeutic. And when we had to write about something, I just knew, it was never even a doubt in my mind, this is what I was writing about, that there are therapeutic benefits of time spent in the kitchen in this process.
It's so true. And I, like I started to say, I'll be in the kitchen. Yesterday, I was in the kitchen talking to somebody on the phone, and just a friend. And, so often that's my friend time as I'm chopping and working out aggression and things like that, or telling a story. And when I go on a trip with my girlfriends, we always find some place to do a cooking school and have a glass of wine and cook together and laugh together.
Right.
And it is a sort of therapy.
Right.
And the cooking, the eating, and the things that come out. And so sometimes we think of therapy as, oh, you need therapy. It's sometimes you need therapy.
Right.
It's the lighthearted. I always say everybody needs therapy.
That's
But
exactly it. And the world used to be, it used to be the conversation, that was a very Freudian situation where the patient, first of all, they call them patients, not clients, but the patient was lying on
right.
a couch deep in thought, and somebody was psychoanalyzing them. And yes, that still exists, and there's still a place for that. But the world is very
Yes.
different now. The world is very
Yes.
different. I think, who can you talk to that hasn't been to therapy at some point, time or another?
Good
Because
for you. It's good.
that's right.
Yeah.
It's good for all of us to self-reflect and work on ourselves and work to make our
Yes.
lives better and happier. And that's what this is. This is what this
and
helps
it's
people
and
do.
it's good for your children. And one of the things I have to say, because I have 3 children and they have friends, there's different forms, and we've talked about that, and this is just another expression. And people, I say this, mental health is so important. And so if somebody needs help, there's all these different ways of getting them help. They don't have to lay on a couch,
Right.
that
Right.
may not be their thing. and
Right.
and so there are different expressions. And one of the things with the pandemic is you are on Zoom. So are you finding that you're still able to make a good connection with families? Are they zoomed out or zooming in?
So
Okay.
there's pluses and minuses like everything else. First of
Mm-hmm.
all, I've had clients all over the world. If I'm doing something in person, obviously I'm so much more limited as to my client base. So that's a perk. Number one, I've been able to reach and meet people from all over. There's also something to be said about, I'm zooming from my own kitchen. This is not a background. This is my kitchen. And there is something special about being able to show myself in a vulnerable way of, this is my home, this is my life. You might hear my kids screaming in the background, and the same for others, instead of meeting in some neutral, kitchen space or office setting. So there are benefits, there really are. The sessions do tend to be a little bit shorter when we're in person. Sometimes sessions can go, especially if it's a family or group session,
Mm,
they do tend to go more towards like 90 minutes. Whereas
mm.
if we're on Zoom, they are closer to an hour, because it's hard to maneuver a computer in your kitchen. It can be tougher, but it
I know
works.
you're gonna have to install like camera lights, like a TV studio in your
Right from above.
like the whole Rachel Ray
Yes.
studio.
Yes.
We'll have to call your husband.
Right.
I know what he does now. So
Yep. Well, I've gotten very creative at the placement of piling my computer up on board games and
right.
my phone in a stand, and that's just
Everybody
it.
everybody has learned to raise their laptops and adapt in this camera
Exactly.
lighted world. It's
Exactly.
crazy.
Yes.
I'm so excited, selfishly, to be able to be your publicist and talk about this, because I'm a real believer in mental health for sure. And I who doesn't love to eat, but I think that bringing people around um, food and sensories and being able to share their feelings in a different way, because I just think that not everybody can express themselves in this just sort of uniform way.
Right.
And even if you do sessions with you, there, you can do sessions elsewhere too. It's just,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and I also love, like, as my parents have gotten older, my dad loves to cook now. And my sister and I laugh because she'll be visiting my parents and she'll text me and say, "Do you think we'll ever eat?" And I'm like, "Are mom and dad in the kitchen together?" I mean, it becomes where I would like a therapist in there, because it's, mayhem and craziness. But on the other side, it's just sort of this wonderful exchange of, they each have their own little thing of what's going on. And in
Right.
the end, even if they're screaming at each other, they have this connection of what they're doing and what they like to do, and they're doing it together.
Absolutely. And even, screaming is communicating.
Oh, yeah.
And that is part of it. So
Oh,
even,
yeah.
it's better if it's something is a fight for something else, but maybe if you get out that energy and you work it through in the kitchen,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
what
Oh,
they're
yeah.
doing.
I mean, sometimes you say, I'd rather be screaming and loving you than bottling it up. But
That's right.
I just love, my 83-year-old, almost 84-year-old dad making something other than eggs. I mean, he's really quite the
That's
chef. And my
awesome.
and my mom is always, we always say my mom is better than a restaurant. That's our little laugh in our house. But
Great.
and I can get away with anything because they don't watch Facebook. So
I won't tell them.
but I mean, it's just, it is such a great way of expressing your feelings. I say that if you got a lot to get out, you want Rachel. I was going to say Rachel. Look at that.
It's okay. I answered her.
Rachel, if you're watching, see, I'm used to it, but you really want Julie. Sorry, guys. I know who my client is. You really want to see, Rachel was my client. You really want Julie in Culinary Art Therapy with you at culinaryarttherapy.com. It is on this link that we're watching today. You can watch my social media because I share a lot of her wonderful food shots. You want to follow her on Instagram. You'll get hungry. Um, but I really am excited because you have a lot of exciting things coming up, and it'll be fun. And every once in a while, you get to see Julie's really cute kids. They sneak in.
They love being in the kitchen with me.
So that's amazing. Thanks so much for sharing time.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm always happy to talk food and therapy, and appreciate all the listeners.
Well, we appreciate it. Thank you.